From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Yesterday, after years of advocacy, when we heard that the president had commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence, we were so relieved, and we finally felt like there would be some sense of long overdue justice in her case.
Supporters of Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning and Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera are celebrating after President Obama commuted their sentences in one of his last acts in office. But Obama took no action on longtime in prison Native American leader Leonard Peltier.
The only thing I'm guilty of is struggling for my people. I didn't kill those agents.
We'll speak to the attorneys for Chelsea Manning and Leonard Peltier, as well as Oscar Lopez Rivera's brother, Jose, who's preparing for him to come home. Then we look at Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump's pick for Education Secretary.
Do you think if you were not a multi-billionaire, if your family has not made hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions to the Republican Party, that you would be sitting here today?
Senator, as a matter of fact, I do think that there would be that possibility.
We'll speak with investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill about DeVos and how DeVos's brother, Blackwater founder Eric Prince, is advising Donald Trump from the shadows. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's commuted the sentences of Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning and Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera as part of more than 200 commutations issued Tuesday. Chelsea Manning is now set to be freed May 17th after Obama shortened her sentence from 35 years to 7. Attorneys for Manning say she's already the longest-held whistleblower in U.S. history. Manning leaked more than 700,000 classified files and videos to WikiLeaks about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and U.S. foreign policy. She's been subjected to long stretches of solitary confinement and denied medical treatment related to her gender identity. She attempted to commit suicide twice last year. Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera has been imprisoned for about 35 years, much of that time in solitary confinement. In 1981, Lopez Rivera was convicted on federal charges including seditious conspiracy, conspiring to oppose U.S. authority over Puerto Rico by force. In 1999, President Bill Clinton commuted the sentences of 16 members of the FALN, but Lopez Rivera refused to accept the deal because it did not include 2 fellow activists who've since been released. Under the Obama commutation order, Lopez Rivera will also be released on May 17th. On Tuesday, Obama also commuted the sentence of retired U.S. Marine Corps General James Cartwright. Last year, Cartwright admitted he lied to the FBI during an investigation into who leaked classified information to the New York Times about Stuxnet, a secret U.S. cyber warfare operation against Iran. According to Yahoo News, General Cartwright was the 10th person to be criminally charged under President Obama in a case related to classified disclosures, more by far than were brought by any president before him. We'll have more on the commutations of Manning and Oscar Lopez Rivera after headlines. President Obama did not, however, pardon NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden or Native American activist Leonard Peltier Tuesday. Peltier is a former member of the American Indian Movement who is convicted of killing 2 FBI agents during a shootout on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in 1975. He's long maintained his innocence. Many are calling on Obama to pardon Peltier, and activists have been maintaining a daily vigil outside the White House since late November demanding his freedom. We'll have more on Peltier's case later in the broadcast. Confirmation hearings for President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet nominations continue on Capitol Hill. On Tuesday, Education Secretary nominee Betsy DeVos faced intense questioning by Democratic senators over her role in her family's foundations, which have poured millions of dollars into funding private Christian schools and anti-LGBTQ organizations, including the group's Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has listed as an anti-LGBT hate group. This is New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan.
I understand that there is a foundation, the Edgar and Elsie Prince Foundation, which I take it is a foundation named for your parents. Is that correct?
It's my mother's foundation.
It's your mother's foundation, and you sit on the board.
I do not.
You do not?
No.
Okay, so when it made its over $5 million donation to Focus on the Family, you didn't know anything about it?
My mother makes the decisions for her foundation.
That's Betsy DeVos answering Senator Hassan's questioning. Later in the confirmation hearing, Senator Hassan again questioned DeVos about her role in the Family Foundation.
I just wanted to clarify the issue about whether you were on the board of your mother's foundation. I have 990s up through 2013 where you're listed as the vice president and a board member. So was that just a mistake on your part?
That was a clerical error. I can assure you I have never made decisions on my mother's behalf on her foundation board.
So the listing that you were the vice president of the board is incorrect?
That is incorrect.
DeVos was listed as the foundation's vice president in federal tax filings for several years. Betsy DeVos is a longtime backer of charter schools and vouchers for private and religious schools. She and her husband have also invested in a student debt collection agency that does business with the Education Department. During Tuesday's hearing, Washington Senator Perry Murray questioned DeVos about whether she would privatize education.
Can you commit to us tonight that you will not work to privatize public schools or cut a single penny from public education?
Senator, thanks for that question. I look forward, if confirmed, to working with you to talk about how we address the needs of all parents and all students. And we acknowledge today that not all schools are working for the students that are assigned to them. And I'm hopeful that we can work together to find common ground in ways that we can solve those issues and empower parents to make choices on behalf of their children that are right for them.
I take that as not being willing to commit to not privatizing public schools or cutting money from education.
The Senate also held confirmation hearings Tuesday for Montana Congressmember Ryan Zinke, who's Trump's nominee to head the Interior Department. This is Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski questioning Zinke about whether he would attempt to roll back President Obama's ban on oil drilling in the Arctic.
Will you commit to a formal review of all of the Obama administration's actions that took resource-bearing lands and waters in Alaska effectively off the table, including the decisions that specifically prevented the leasing of those lands and those waters for development, and determine whether or not they can be reversed?
Yes. I think the president-elect has said that we want to be energy independent.
Today, the Senate will hold confirmation hearings for billionaire Wilbur Ross, Trump's nominee for Commerce Secretary, Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt for EPA Director, and Georgia Republican Congressman Tom Price, Trump's pick to head the Department of Health and Human Services. Price's confirmation hearing comes as a new study by the Congressional Budget Office says 18 million people could lose their health insurance if the Congress repeals major provisions of the Affordable Care Act. The office's report says the repeal would leave 32 million people without health insurance and cause the cost of insurance premiums to double over the next 10 years. Obamacare currently has a favorable approval rating of 44%. 59 House Democrats and counting now say they will not attend Trump's inauguration. The boycott began after Trump attacked civil rights icon John Lewis over the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend. On Twitter, Trump called Lewis all talk, 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 no action, and told Lewis he should, quote, focus on the burning and crime-infested inner cities, unquote. On Tuesday night, a man lit a fire near Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., and said he was trying to light himself on fire as a protest against Trump's inauguration. Trump has a historically low approval rating for an incoming president. A Monmouth University poll released Tuesday found only 34% of U.S. residents view Trump favorably. President Obama, in comparison, had an 84% approval rating just before his inauguration in 2009. A former contestant on Trump's reality TV show, The Celebrity Apprentice, has sued Trump for defamation. In October, Summer Zervos of The Apprentice accused Trump of repeatedly sexually assaulting her during a meeting in 2007, saying Trump kissed her on the lips, pressed his body against hers, and groped her breasts, all without her consent. She was among a series of women who accused Trump of sexual assault during the 2016 campaign. Trump, in return, called Zervos, the other woman, and the other women liars. This is Zervos announcing her lawsuit alongside her lawyer, Gloria Allred.
Since Mr. Trump has not issued a retraction, as I requested, he has therefore left me with no alternative other than to sue him in order to vindicate my reputation. I want Mr. Trump to know that I will still be willing to dismiss my case against him immediately for no monetary compensation if he would simply retract his false and defamatory statements about me and acknowledge that I told the truth about him.
was Summer Zervos, previously on The Apprentice. At a news conference in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin responded to unsubstantiated memos prepared by a British intelligence operative that say Russia has compromising information on Trump, including a sex tape of Trump from 2013 involving prostitutes in Moscow. This is Putin.
Trump arrived and straightaway rushed to meet with Moscow prostitutes. This is an adult man, first of all, and apart from that, is a man who for many years took part in organizing beauty contests. He has socialized with the most beautiful women in the world. It is hard to believe that he ran to a hotel to meet with our girls of loose morals, although they are the best in the world.
Just after arriving in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Donald Trump appeared at dinner for foreign diplomats in D.C., during which he spoke about longtime ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, who Trump has nominated to head the State Department.
Rex Tillerson, and these lights are bright, but he's around here someplace. Where's our Rex? Wow. What a job. And Brenda, thank you very much. Thanks, Rex. I think it's tougher than he thought. He figured, you know, he's led this charmed life. He goes into a country, takes the oil, goes into another country. It's tough dealing with these politicians, right? He's going to be so incredible, and I'm very proud of him.
During Tillerson's confirmation hearing, he faced opposition from some members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, including Republican Florida Senator Marco Rubio, as well as others, over Tillerson's close ties to Russia. But even if Senator Rubio votes against Tillerson and the committee does not approve him, the committee chair, Senator Bob Corker, may take the unusual step of calling a vote on whether to send Tillerson's nomination to the full Senate, a move that hasn't happened in decades. The Nigeria military has bombed a government-run displaced persons camp, killing dozens of refugees and at least 6 humanitarian aid workers. Nigerian officials say the bombing was an accident. This is Hughes Robert of Doctors Without Borders.
We are speaking about a location that was really hard to reach, where people for more than 6 months could not access basic already assistance, where population was really in a very bad situation with extremely severe acute malnutrition on spots. And on top of that, we have these mass casualties with these massive, casualties due to a direct bombing of a highly populated area. So it's really like the worst you can imagine in terms of situation.
In North Dakota, Republican lawmakers have introduced a bill that would shield drivers from liability if they injure or kill a pedestrian obstructing traffic. It's one of several bills aimed at cracking down on the resistance against the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline, which has seen Native American water protectors at times marching on public roads and highways. Actions against pipelines continue across the United States, including in Florida, where water protectors locked themselves to a truck Monday to stop the Sable pipeline. In Memphis, Tennessee, where 12 activists were arrested at the Valero refinery at a protest against the Diamond Pipeline on Monday. And in Texas, 2 water protectors were arrested after locking themselves to heavy equipment Friday to delay construction of the Trans-Pecos pipeline, which is being built by the same company behind the Dakota Access Pipeline. In New York City, over 100 people set up a protest encampment outside the headquarters of financial giant Goldman Sachs, which they are calling government Sachs. At least 3 of Trump's cabinet and cabinet-level picks are tied to Goldman Sachs, including Treasury Secretary nominee Steve Mnuchin, National Economic Council Director Goldman Sachs President Gary Cohn, and Trump chief strategist, former Goldman Sachs executive Stephen Bannon. Over a dozen people camped out overnight in the freezing cold. This is protester Jonathan Weston.
I would say people that believed he was going to drain the swamp have been lied to. It has been a complete fraud. When he talked about draining the swamp, he brought them in closer. He brought all of the swamp monsters inside the White House. Now they have a permanent office and are controlling all of the institutions of government.
And in Mexico, Goldman Environmental Prize winner Isidro Bocanegra Lopez has been assassinated. The indigenous leader has long organized against illegal logging and deforestation in the Sierra Madre Mountains. Decades ago, his father was also murdered after leading mass protests against illegal logging in their family's ancestral lands. This is Bocanegra Lopez, who won the prestigious Goldman Prize in 2005.
We know there are people who want to pillage the riches of the Sierra, and they don't even live here. By fraud and forgery, they managed to get away with it. And we oppose this. They are not going to log the forest.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In one of his final acts in office, President Obama shortened the sentences of 209 prisoners, pardoned 64 individuals on Tuesday. The list included Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning, longtime in-prison Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera, and retired U.S. Marine Corps General James Cartwright. But missing from the list is 71-year-old Native American activist Leonard Peltier. Later in the program, we'll look at the cases of Peltier and Oscar Lopez Rivera, but first to Chelsea Manning, who's now set to be free May 17th after Obama shortened her sentence from 35 years to 7. According to her attorney, she's already the longest-held whistleblower in U.S. history. She's been in military custody since May 2010. Manning leaked more than 700,000 classified files and videos to WikiLeaks about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and U.S. foreign policy. She's been subjected to long stretches of solitary confinement and denied medical treatment related to her gender identity. Chelsea Manning attempted to commit suicide twice last year. Joining us now are two of her attorneys. Nancy Hollander is Manning's appellate attorney. Chase Strangio of the ACLU represents Manning in a lawsuit against the Pentagon for denial of medical care related to her gender dysphoria. Also with us is The Intercept's Jeremy Scahill, author of the recent piece, The True Scandal of 2016 Was the Torture of Chelsea Manning. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Chase Strangio, your response to what President Obama did yesterday.
Well, I first want to thank you and everyone who's supported Chelsea over the years. The reality is that this was a mass mobilization effort, keeping her story alive, led by Chelsea herself and all of the people who made sure that nobody forgot the justice that she fought for and the incredible symbol of democratic principles and advocacy that she really embodies. Yesterday was an incredible day for us who care about her. As I've said time and time again, President Obama really had her life in his hands, and it's such a relief that he acted on the side of mercy and justice here.
Have you spoken to Chelsea?
Unfortunately, we haven't spoken to Chelsea, which is a bit concerning, but we're remaining hopeful that we will be able to speak with her today and actually be able to share this news. It's quite unusual for the individual to not be informed of their commutation with their attorneys, but we know that she was on standby waiting for this. I spoke with her yesterday around 2 p.m. And she was just her sort of hopeful, pragmatic self, waiting for news, and we were all hoping and praying with her. So hopefully today we'll connect with her and get to share in this incredible moment that really did save her life.
You believe she was the longest-held whistleblower?
Yeah, absolutely. She has served 7 years already. The 35-year sentence was egregious at the time. It's particularly egregious in retrospect. And she has served 7 years. It is absolutely preposterous to hear people saying that there are no consequences for her actions. She has been tortured and imprisoned, denied basic medical care. She has suffered so much, and it is time for her to be free.
Nancy Hollander, the response on the networks, I was watching CNN last night, the overwhelming response of the guests that they've had on. Let me go to some of the comments. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan released a statement protesting the commutation, saying, quote, "This is just outrageous. Chelsea Manning's treachery put American lives at risk and exposed some of our nation's most sensitive secrets. President Obama now leaves in place a dangerous precedent that those who compromise our national security won't be held accountable for their crimes." Meanwhile, Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona called the commutation a grave mistake that may, quote, "encourage further acts of espionage and undermine military discipline." He added, quote, "Thousands of Americans have given their lives in Afghanistan and Iraq upholding their oaths and defending this nation. Chelsea Manning broke her oath and made it more likely that others would join the ranks of her fallen comrades. Her prison sentence may end in a few months, but her dishonor will last forever," McCain said. Nancy Hollander, your response.
It's just false. The Secretary of Defense at the time, Gates, said that the worst that happened was some embarrassment for the United States. There was not a single individual ever identified who was harmed by what Chelsea did. What Chelsea did actually helped the United States. It helped Americans. It helped people around the world understand about human rights violations, bring war home to people. She wanted people to see what happens to somebody who gets killed, what happens to people in Iraq and Afghanistan. She wanted to make this real so that we would stop doing these kinds of things to people. And so what they're saying is exactly the opposite of what Chelsea did. There's never been a single bit of evidence that anybody was harmed or that national security was harmed.
On Friday, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest told reporters there was a stark difference between the cases of U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning and NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
There are some important differences, including the scale of the crimes that were committed and the consequences of their crimes. Obviously, as Chelsea Manning has acknowledged, and as we have said many times, the release of the information that she provided to WikiLeaks was damaging to national security. But the disclosures by Edward Snowden were far more serious and far more dangerous.
On Friday, a campaign supporting Edward Snowden delivered a petition with more than 1 million signatures to the White House demanding a pardon. Jeremy Scahill, what Josh Earnest said in differentiating Snowden from Chelsea Manning.
Well, I mean, there are clear differences between what Chelsea Manning did and the way that Chelsea Manning's been treated and Edward Snowden. But I do reject the idea that they're using Edward Snowden as sort of a stepladder to justify this. The reality is that President Obama should have issued a full pardon to Chelsea Manning and should have never allowed the kind of abuse that she's endured to go on for this period. Let's remember, though, that Chelsea Manning didn't just leak the collateral murder video that showed the killing of Iraqi civilians and journalists from the Reuters news agency, didn't just release the State Department cables that showed all sorts of blackmail, cajoling, corruption, support for dictators around the world. It was one of the most incredible moments in the history of democracy in this country, where people actually got to have the curtain pulled back and to see how the government functions in private and how it contradicts the public proclamations of the United States being this beacon of hope, the shining, city on the top of the hill. And also, Chelsea Manning provided the Iraq war logs and the Afghan war logs that detailed numerous crimes committed by the United States and its allies in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also gave us an unprecedented window into how the assassination forces that the U.S. had unleashed in those countries functioned. But not a single document that Chelsea Manning is known to have released was a top-secret document. And I think that's a technical distinction from what Edward Snowden did. And I think that that's part of why Josh Earnest is saying this. But let's be clear. Edward Snowden also is a whistleblower deserving of an embrace from people who believe in democracy. We understand now, the breaking news today was that the Russian government is saying it's extending Edward Snowden's ability to stay in Russia for 2 more years, and a senior Russian official rejected the suggestion by former acting CIA director Mike Morell that Snowden should be handed over to the U.S. by Putin as a thank you gift to the incoming President Donald Trump. And the Russian Foreign Ministry said it's curious that a former director of the CIA actually views the giving of people as a gift, and it says a lot about the United States. But no, I think that the White House is using Edward Snowden in an attempt to justify the commutation of the sentence of Chelsea Manning. I'm ecstatic that Obama did even this. I think he should have gone farther and issued a full pardon to
One
Chelsea
of the
Manning.
things Josh Earnest said, and this was before the announcement that the sentence of Chelsea Manning would be commuted, when talking about Edward Snowden, is he went to a country that is an adversary.
Well, first of all, that's an outright lie. When Edward Snowden was in midair on the way to Moscow, the United States
headed to Latin America.
Right. Well, we don't know exactly where, but we understand somewhere in Latin America. While he was in the air en route to Moscow, the United States canceled his passport. So it was the Obama administration that chose Russia. Edward Snowden did not choose Russia. And then they tried to force Evo Morales, well, they actually did force Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia's plane down, thinking that Edward Snowden was on board it. My understanding is that supporters of Snowden had bought tickets for him on multiple airlines in an attempt to kind of fog up the U.S. efforts to catch him.
And so because he didn't have his passport, when he was in transit, stopped at Moscow, he couldn't leave
Right, he had to stay in the airport for weeks on end.
Earlier this month, WikiLeaks said its founder, Julian Assange, was prepared to give up his freedom in exchange for Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning. A statement on WikiLeaks' Twitter page read, "If Obama grants Manning clemency, Assange will agree to U.S. extradition despite clear unconstitutionality of DOJ case." Can you comment on this, Jeremy?
Well, first of all, I mean, I know our dear friend, the late Michael Ratner, believed that there was a lot of evidence to indicate that there was a secret or sealed indictment against Julian Assange, but that has not been confirmed. So it's unclear, even if there are charges against Julian Assange. Some of the leaked documents from Hillary Clinton's circle indicate that maybe there is. But it's unclear that there's even an extradition request to respond to in the first place. And I think that, Assange has plenty of trouble facing him if he steps outside of that embassy. The potential for the U.S. to want to extradite him, certainly there. Sweden is definitely going to want him to spend some time in jail, and Assange himself has acknowledged that. And the British government, of course, may bring a whole array of new charges against him as well. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Assange did say it, and so we'll see what happens.
On Tuesday, former New York Times reporter Judith Miller tweeted, "Obama commutes sentence of Chelsea Manning. How many people died because of Manning's leak?" That is what Judith Miller tweeted, the former New York Times reporter. In the lead up to the Iraq invasion, Miller wrote several of the key articles that falsely claimed Iraq had extensive weapons of mass destruction program ahead of the Iraq invasion, paving the way for the war in Iraq.
I mean, Judith Miller was a witting participant in a sophisticated propaganda campaign orchestrated by Dick Cheney and the top levels of power in the United States government to falsify a case to invade and destroy Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people died in that war. Thousands of U.S. soldiers were killed in that war. Judith Miller shouldn't write with ink. She should write with the blood that she has caused to be shed around the world, and shame on her for attacking Chelsea Manning, whose entire intent was to save lives, when she has knowingly participated in a drive to an unjust, illegal war that killed scores of people. She should, as they say, delete her account.
Chase Strangio, as we wrap up, your final comment, and do you know what Chelsea Manning will be doing when she gets out of Leavenworth?
I have no doubt that Chelsea Manning will continue to just absolutely fight for all of the principles that she has long stood for, continue to engage in a campaign of advocacy for transparency, for transgender justice, for the justice of so many people. And I have no doubt that today she, as she always is thinking about other people like Leonard Peltier and other people who are still awaiting to hear about the commutation of their sentences.
The pardon of General Cartwright?
Well, General Cartwright was part of the official leaks program, where the White House wants to put out information that they feel makes them look glorious, like as we saw John Brennan and others do in the Navy SEAL raid on Osama bin Laden. What this boiled down to was Cartwright leaked information about the Stuxnet virus, and he appeared to have done it with the permission of the highest levels of power in the Obama administration. It's unclear if Obama himself approved it, but then he got caught lying to the FBI. And the whole point of it was to say, hey, we dismantled, or we penetrated Iran's nuclear program with this amazing computer virus that we created potentially in concert with the Israelis. Cartwright then got caught lying to the FBI. And so this is sort of akin to, some of the pardons that took place in Richard Nixon's administration. Basically, Cartwright did this at the pleasure of the White House, so to speak, and so he's part of the official leaks program, as so many other unindicted people are in the White House. Big contrast to how they treat conscience-motivated whistleblowers.
And Nancy Hollander, what this means for future whistleblowers.
I think it's very important for future whistleblowers to see how Chelsea was treated and mistreated, and none of that is going to go away. but at least the president has reduced her sentence. But we've always been concerned, and Chelsea's been concerned, that future whistleblowers will be afraid to come out and step forward. And Chelsea will be out there doing service to her community, and she can't wait to do that.
Nancy Hollander, appellate attorney for Chelsea Manning. Chase Strangio, staff attorney at the ACLU, represented Chelsea Manning in a lawsuit against the Pentagon. And Jeremy Scahill, I hope you'll stay with us for the end of the show to talk about the confirmation hearing for Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. When we come back, Oscar Lopez Rivera has also had his sentence commuted. We'll talk with his brother and Juan Gonzalez. Stay with us.
Wake up, little sparrow. Don't make your home out in the sun. Don't make your home out in the sun. Little bird, oh, don't you know your friends flew south many months ago. Your friends flew south many months ago.
Little Sparrow by Layla Michaela here on Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Tuesday, President Obama also commuted the sentence of longtime Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera, who's been in prison for 35 years, much of the time in solitary confinement. In 1981, Lopez Rivera was convicted on federal charges including seditious conspiracy, conspiring to oppose U.S. authority over Puerto Rico. In 1999, President Bill Clinton commuted the sentences of 16 members of the FALN, but Lopez Rivera refused to accept the deal. He could have been freed then, because it didn't include two fellow activists who have since been released. Under President Obama's commutation order, Lopez Rivera will also be released on May 17th. Joining us now, Oscar's brother, Jose Lopez Rivera in Chicago, as well as Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez joining us from New Brunswick. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Jose, how are you feeling today? When did you get the news?
Well, we got the news at around 2 o'clock yesterday, and obviously the lawyer, Jen Sussler, received the call, and we had a teleconference with Congressman Luis Gutierrez, the mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín, and the speaker of the New York City Council, Melissa Viverito, as well as Oscar's only daughter, Clarissa. And there was a group of us who have been spearheading this campaign, and when she told us the news, everybody just went up. I mean, you could hear the screams and we were unable to continue the meeting because of the incredible joy that was expressed. And while I'm at it, I want to express, obviously, our gratitude to everyone who supported my brother's release. And Democracy Now! And Juan Gonzalez were obviously one of the few voices that spoke about this campaign, and we want to thank you for that as well.
Well, let's bring Juan Gonzalez into this conversation. Hi, Juan. Talk about the significance of the release of Oscar Lopez Rivera.
Amy, I think this is a momentous time for the people of Puerto Rico, and Jose Lopez. I know the campaign to free Oscar has been relentless throughout the years now. I remember back, for instance, just as recently as the Democratic National Convention. You remember that, Jose?
Yes, we do.
We covered your activities there. Several hundred people who had come from all over the United States and Puerto Rico to raise the issue before the Democratic Party. Of course, candidate Bernie Sanders had repeatedly raised the issue of Oscar Lopez Rivera and pleaded with President Obama to release him. I go back to 1979. I was there when the four nationalists were freed by President Jimmy Carter, and they all came to a big rally on the west side of Manhattan. And then, of course, in 1980, when several of the FALN members had their sentences commuted by 1996, when President Clinton also released them. So I think that there's been a long history in the United States, because Puerto Rico is still a colony of the United States, of people who support and believe in the independence of Puerto Rico, doing everything that they can possibly to end colonialism. And so this is really just another symbol of the reality that the United States still has not dealt with the status of Puerto Rico. And the amazing thing is, in the case of Oscar López Rivera, basically the entire Puerto Rican diaspora and the nation of Puerto Rico were united. Virtually every elected official in the United States of Puerto Rican origin, as well as all of the different political parties and religious groups on the island, had been calling for Oscar López Rivera's release now for decades. They didn't necessarily agree with his vision of independence, but they understood that he was a freedom fighter and that he had been in jail far too long, considering the charges against him.
Let's turn to Oscar López Rivera in his own words. In a rare video recording from prison, he said the charges against him were strictly political.
I think that the fact that I was charged with seditious conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States speaks for itself. But the charge in reference to Puerto Ricans has always been used for political purposes. It goes back to 1936, the first time that a group of Puerto Ricans was put in prison was by using the seditious conspiracy charge. And this has always been a strictly political charge used against Puerto Ricans.
Among those who clearly supported him and certainly had the ear of President Obama were celebrities like Lin-Manuel Miranda, who was the creator of the Broadway hit Hamilton. Jose López Rivera, how important was this? And finally, what are Oscar's plans once he gets out? Or I should say, perhaps your plans for him when he returns to Chicago?
Well, first, I think he's going to make a stop in Chicago and then go right to Puerto Rico, where his daughter lives, and obviously a large part of my family lives. But I think the campaign to free Oscar was an amazing campaign. I think that Juan has articulated quite well, but I would add that you have 10 Nobel Peace Prize laureate winners. You have Pope Francis. You have added the voices, obviously, of the Hispanic Congressional Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Progressive Caucus of the U.S. Congress. We deliver 105,000 written petitions to Obama on January 11th, which, by the way, was the birthday of Eugenio María de Hostos, one of the most important voices of 19th century Puerto Rican independence movement. We deliver 108,000 on We the People petition. So obviously it was a widespread movement that included the major leaders of all the major labor organizations, the AFL-CIO, AFSCME, SCIU, as well as hundreds and hundreds of very, very important voices from the religious community, from civil society, from the environmental movement. I mean, it was really this campaign captured the imagination of incredible numbers of people across the world. On June 20th of last year, in 45 countries, there were rallies and events held in support of Oscar. So obviously, we're very pleased with it, and Oscar will come and join us, and he will be part of the conversation to decolonize Puerto Rico.
Jose Lopez Rivera, we thank you so much for being with us, Executive Director of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Chicago and brother of Oscar Lopez Rivera. And Juan, congratulations on your first day of teaching at Rutgers University, speaking to you in New Brunswick. Democracy Now!
Yeah, I'd also like to add that you mentioned Lin-Manuel Miranda. He put out an interesting tweet yesterday when he heard the news. He said, sobbing with gratitude here in London, Oscar Lopez Rivera is coming home. Thank you at POTUS. And then he also sent a tweet to Melissa Mark Viverito, the Speaker of the New York City Council, who's obviously also been campaigning for the freedom of Oscar. And he said, when you talk to Oscar, dile, I have a show for him in Chicago, and it'll be my honor to play Hamilton the night he goes. So Lin-Manuel will be flying from London, especially whenever Oscar Lopez Rivera is out, to play Hamilton personally in his show in Chicago.
Well, Juan, thank you so much. And again, Jose, thanks for joining us. And of course, we will be there May 17th covering the release of Oscar Lopez Rivera. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as we turn now to another sentence. While President Obama shortened the sentences of Oscar Lopez Rivera and Chelsea Manning and 207 other prisoners, Obama took no action on 71-year-old imprisoned Native American activist Leonard Peltier. Peltier is a former member of the American Indian Movement who was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents during a shootout on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in 1975. He's long maintained his innocence. Peltier's attorney, Martin Garbus, joins us now here in New York. No word yet, although President Obama is still in office, Martin.
No word yet. We just received confirmation that yesterday a letter from the Vatican went to the White House. That went in the afternoon. There's another thing. I think that on behalf of Leonard Peltier, I want to thank you. I want to thank what happened as a result of this show. I was on about 3 weeks ago, and James Reynolds, who had been the prosecutor in the Peltier case, saw the show, and then as a result of the show, decided to come out after 40 years of silence and write a letter to the White House saying that the prosecution was flawed and asking for clemency for Leonard Peltier. It's an amazing turn of events. We were all surprised by it. Nothing like that has happened before. Immediately after that, a special FBI agent, Jack Ryan, who had been in that area at the same time, came out with a similar letter. Each of the letters went through the law. Each of the letters went through the facts. Each of the letters came out and asked for clemency, and that was a result of our discussion on this show a little while ago.
Is there any possibility? Have you heard anything from the White House?
We have not heard anything from the White House. We do not have a denial, and, of course, his name was not in yesterday's list.
And have you spoken to Leonard Peltier since this list came out?
I communicated with Leonard yesterday. I was upset because his name was not on yesterday's list. And then when I heard about the letter from the Pope, I communicated with him. He knows that there are more names coming out. And I think it's fair to say that if he doesn't get commuted by President Obama, he'll die in jail. He's a very sick man. So Obama's not granting him clemency is like a sentence of death. Trump ain't going to do it, and he's very sick, and he's not going to live past that time. I don't want to be negative, but that's the reality. He's very sick, and he's been in prison over 40 years, hard years, 6 years of solitary. So they've gotten their pound of flesh from him. And I think insofar as the Native Americans, there should be an awareness that he's important to them, he's important to their cause. You and I both know that that's a group of people awfully neglected. I know you were out there in Standing Rock recently I'm going out there in about 2 months to try some cases. So you and I both know what's happened to Native Americans in America.
And certainly when we were at Standing Rock, the call for clemency for Leonard Peltier from every angle of every resistance camp, even the FBI agent, Jack Ryan, wrote, Leonard Peltier should receive clemency, quote, in the interest of the system of justice for which my 2 fellow agents died, and in the interest of reconciliation and compassion.
Right. I mean, I think it's hard for people to understand that you had the Native Americans in a center shooting out. You had the FBI and the Army shooting in. It was impossible to tell which bullets went where. An Indian was killed, a Native American was killed. There was never a prosecution of him. Before Leonard was prosecuted, 2 other people were prosecuted and were acquitted.
Well, Martin Garbus, of course, will continue to follow Leonard Peltier's case. Martin Garbus, one of the country's leading trial lawyers, lead counsel for Leonard Peltier. When we come back, we look at the confirmation hearing for Betsy DeVos, one of the leaders for privatization of education, to be the next Education Secretary of the United States. Stay with us.
Nueva York, cielo rasgado. Texas, Florida, Hawái, Chicago, la ventolera. Como yo, cuántos esperan que se puedan regresar a su islita del encanto. Entre tanto, algo y tanto, sin que el llanto llegue a ser nada más que un manto tibio que a mi ojo ayude a ver.
1,000 Pieces of You by Andy Montañez. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Tuesday, Education Secretary nominee Betsy DeVos faced intense questioning by Democratic senators during her confirmation hearing. DeVos is a longtime backer of charter schools and vouchers for private and religious schools. She and her husband have also invested in a student debt collection agency that does business with the Education Department. Her brother is Eric Prince, founder of the mercenary firm Blackwater. On Tuesday, DeVos was repeatedly questioned over her role in her family's foundations, which have poured millions of dollars, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions, into funding private Christian schools and anti-LGBT organizations, including the groups Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has listed as a hate group. This is New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan.
I understand that there is a foundation, the Edgar and Elsie Prince Foundation, which I take it is a foundation named for your parents. Is that correct?
It's my mother's foundation.
It's your mother's foundation, and you sit on the board.
I do not.
You do not?
No.
Okay, so when it made its over $5 million donation to Focus on the Family, you didn't know anything about it?
My mother makes the decisions for her foundation.
Later in the confirmation hearing, Senator Hassan again questioned DeVos about her role in the Family Foundation.
I just wanted to clarify the issue about whether you were on the board of your mother's foundation. I have 990s up through 2013 where you're listed as the vice president and a board member. So was that just a mistake on your part?
That was a clerical error. I can assure you I have never made decisions on my mother's behalf on her foundation board.
So the listing that you were the vice president of the board is incorrect?
That is incorrect.
That's Education Secretary nominee Betsy DeVos being questioned by New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan during Tuesday's confirmation hearing. Federal tax filings show DeVos was listed as the foundation's vice president for several years. Meanwhile, DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, has been quietly advising Trump's transition team, including helping vet cabinet picks. That's according to a former senior U.S. official who spoke to The Intercept's Jeremy Scahill. On election night, Prince's wife, Stacey DeLuke, even posted pictures from inside Trump's campaign headquarters. Well, joining us now now is investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill, who has closely covered the Prince and DeVos families for years. His most recent article about Betsy DeVos's brother is headlined "Notorious Mercenary Eric Prince is Advising Trump from the Shadows." Jeremy will be the host of a new weekly podcast, Intercepted, which premieres January 25th. You can subscribe on iTunes and other platforms. Jeremy, talk about Betsy DeVos.
Well, I mean, first of all, let's put this in context. Betsy DeVos is Eric Prince's brother and comes from an incredibly wealthy family in western Michigan. They basically run the city of Holland, Michigan. She and Eric's father built up a company that later, when he died, was sold to Johnson Controls for $1.6 billion in cash. Eric Prince goes off and starts Blackwater with his share of the money. But Betsy married Dick DeVos, who is the heir to the Amway Corporation's fortune, the people that owned the Orlando Magic basketball team. Those two families together in the 1990s gave the seed money to what became known as the radical religious right in the United States. They gave the money to Gary Bauer and the Family Research Council, to James Dobson and Focus on the Family. They poured some $200 million into Republican campaigns. In addition to that, they had, so on the one hand, they were engaged in the legalized form of bribery that exists in this country through campaign contributions, but then they also were giving money to extremist, hateful organizations masquerading as Christian groups. But these are really hateful people that, if you actually read the Sermon on the Mount, for instance, in the Gospels, you find almost nothing of Jesus' teachings in what these people do. But Betsy DeVos and her husband, Dick DeVos, they really took up the mantle of radical privatization of education as their primary cause. And they've stated, Betsy DeVos herself has stated, that her vision of public education or of education in the U.S. is to bring the kingdom of God. I don't know if Betsy DeVos has read the First Amendment, but what she wants to do to the U.S. Constitution, but what she wants to do is to funnel public funds into religious schools. Now, what Senator Hassan was focused in on is pretty incredible. I would say directly that Betsy DeVos lied in her testimony to the Senate, because she tried to imply repeatedly that she has nothing to do with her very extreme right-wing mother's foundation. And when Hassan rightly asked her, aren't you an official, in this foundation? Betsy DeVos said no. I started then tweeting about it. I posted excerpts of the 990 tax forms that the foundation filed. And then Maggie Hassan returned to the hearing, even though Lamar Alexander, the Republican chair of the committee, most of the hearing was dominated actually by Lamar Alexander trying to figure out a way to justify not letting the Democrats ask questions. So once we then posted parts of the 990, Maggie Hassan then came back, and Patty Murray, the ranking member, gave her part of her time. She then says to Betsy DeVos, wait a minute, I want to clarify something, as we just heard. You weren't on the board. You were the vice president of it. And she says, no, I wasn't. And then says it was a clerical error. Now, there's probably a cleric somewhere in Michigan that's
This is when Maggie Hassan pushed her on it and said, I've got the form right here.
She says, these are, we have the 990s because see, what happened is Betsy DeVos was listed as a vice president. This wasn't just one tax filing. This is a decade worth of tax filings where Betsy DeVos and Eric Prince are listed as vice presidents of their mother's foundation, specifically during the time when they were pouring money into what the Southern Poverty Law Center says was an anti-LGBTQ hate group. And Betsy DeVos, she lied to those senators. Now, that's not the most scandalous thing at all about Betsy DeVos being named as education secretary, but it should be an immediate disqualifier.
Let's turn to Senator Bernie Sanders' questioning of Betsy DeVos.
My question is, and I don't mean to be rude, but do you think if you were not a multi-billionaire, if your family has not made hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions to the Republican Party, that you would be sitting here today?
Senator, as a matter of fact, I do think that there would be that possibility. I've worked very hard on behalf of parents and children for the last almost 30 years to be a voice for parents and to voice for students and to empower parents to make decisions on behalf of their children, primarily low-income children.
There you have Betsy DeVos responding to Bernie Sanders.
Well, I mean, Betsy DeVos was also asked in that hearing directly about the whole scam that was Trump University, and refused to really commit to the idea that they should not that these kinds of private so-called career colleges, like the fraud that Donald Trump engaged in, should receive federal funds, and she really would not commit to that. But there could not be a less qualified individual to run the public education, ministry of the United States government than Betsy DeVos, if the point is to support public education. Because what the DeVosses want, what the Princes want, is to siphon off public financing to go to religious schools because they don't believe in a separation of church and state. They believe in a Christian supremacist theocracy that should govern the United States. And Trump was certainly not their first choice. But if you look at the kind of dominionist crowd that these guys run in, the very right-wing evangelicals, they now have come to peace with the idea that Trump is God's chosen vehicle to deliver these policies. They're very militant believers. Betsy DeVos can try to separate herself from what her mother, Elsa Prince, does, such as giving $450,000 in 1 month alone to try to defeat a ballot initiative over gay marriage, to support a ballot initiative that would ban gay marriage in the state of California. She lives in Michigan. But she was the vice president, along with her brother Eric Prince, the mercenary kingpin, of that foundation at the height of its funding of these hate groups. The idea that we're going to have someone that has supported gay conversion therapy through a foundation that she was the vice president of, even though she said to Tammy Baldwin, oh, no, the first openly gay woman in the Senate, oh, no, I view the intrinsic value of every life. She looked like she wanted to vomit having to speak to an openly gay senator because they hate gay people. Let's just be clear about it. The Prince family and the DeVos family, their public record suggests they hate anyone who is not straight, white, and Christian.
I want to ask you about Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, who you've been talking about, the founder of Blackwater. In July, he spoke to Steve Bannon, who at the time was the head of Breitbart News, the white supremacist, white nationalist news site. Steve Bannon, who's now Trump's senior advisor. Prince said Trump should recreate a version of the Phoenix program, the CIA assassination ring that operated during the Vietnam War to fight ISIS.
It was a vicious but very effective kill capture program in Vietnam that destroyed the Viet Cong as a military force. That's what needs to be done to the funders of Islamic terror, and that would be even the wealthy, radical Islamist billionaires funding it from the Middle East and any of the other illicit activities they're in.
That was Eric Prince, the significance of what he's saying here, Jeremy.
Well, remember, Eric Prince views himself as the rightful heir to the legacy of Wild Bill Donovan, who was the head of the agency that was the precursor to the CIA. And, immediately after 9/11, Eric Prince became very, very close to a number of people within the CIA and also Dick Cheney and Dick Cheney's office. And they jointly came up with this idea that Eric Prince could run a kind of off-the-books hit squad that could roam the world conducting assassinations for the United States. And there would be, no effective paper trail and no ability for Congress to engage in any oversight. Now, Leon Panetta, who was Obama's CIA director early on in Obama's term, said, "Oh, we shut down that program and no one was ever killed." I don't believe that for one moment. That was part of the legacy of the Phoenix program. That was a murderous death squad operation in Vietnam that also included enhanced interrogation. What Eric Prince being around Trump indicates to me is that...
And talk about what you found out about election night and what his role is. We just have 50 seconds.
Right. Well, Robert Mercer, the billionaire hedge funder, his daughter Rebecca ran one of the most important super PACs to Trump, Make America #1 super PAC. And Trump and Eric Prince and his mother Elsa were two of the largest contributors to one of the most significant super PACs that supported Donald Trump. Eric Prince is very close to Robert Mercer. Prince was also at the Heroes and Villains party that Mercer threw in Long Island after the election. And in fact, there's a picture that Peter Thiel, the right-wing billionaire who destroyed Gawker, a picture of Peter Thiel, Donald Trump, and Eric Prince that Peter Thiel says is not safe for the internet. It's clear that Eric Prince, through Betsy DeVos, through Robert Mercer, and through his very right-wing paramilitary crowd, has the ear of President-elect Donald Trump. And our understanding from a very well-placed source is that Prince has even been advising Trump on his selections for the staffing of the Defense Department and the State Department.
We're going to have a post-show discussion and post online at democracynow.org. That's Jeremy Scahill, co-founder of The Intercept. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.